My granddad's death hit me hard. Nothing strange in that, I know. He was my granddad after all. It's just that he was such an important figure in my life and meant so much to me. He passed away just before I turned 20, and I turn 30 in a few weeks. Every birthday since his death has left me feeling more isolated and lost, and this year it's felt worse than ever. He always looked after me during school holidays when my parents were at work. I'd be dropped off at his home by my dad in the morning, and we'd spend the day tending his garden or building something in his shed. We always had some sort of project in the making. He was so self-sufficient and wise, a role model that any youngster could look up to. Even when I was a teenager, I still wandered down to his house for a chat and to check he was all right. I couldn't keep anything from him. I confessed more to him about my teenage worries than I did to even my closest friends. When the illness set in, he was reduced to a shadow of the man I'd known in only a couple of months. I couldn't believe it was happening to him at first. Grandad will beat it, I kept thinking. I was in my first year at university and wanted to postpone my course for a while, but my parents wouldn't let me. "Grandad will be fine," they said. "He'd be very upset if he knew you'd stopped your course for him." I had no reason not to believe them. It was only when they moved him to a nursing home and I saw how the weight had fallen off him that it struck me how serious it was. I sat opposite him in his little room and failed to be the source of strength and reassurance that he'd been to me on so many occasions. We hardly spoke a word to each other during those last few weeks. Mum and Dad wanted to arrange a big 20th birthday celebration for me, and I told them to cancel it. How could I face any birthday when my best friend was dying, let alone my 20th? 10 years I've carried the guilt of those memories with me, the guilt of feeling that I didn't do enough for him. I couldn't stop him from dying, and I failed to bring him any comfort in his final days. I've never spoken to anyone about it, and I know my personal life has suffered as a result. It's as if talking to Grandad about my problems stopped me being able to confide in anyone else. It's not just the memories that make me feel guilty. Nothing he taught me as a youngster seems to mean anything to me as an adult. He showed me how to cook, but my staple diet is ready meals and pre-packed sandwiches. The thought of tending a garden or building something from scratch always feels like it will need more time than I can give. For a while I thought that Jane might be the one who changed all that. We were together for a year, and at one point everything seemed perfect. She was bright, funny, passionate, and tried her best to bring me out of my shell, but foolishly I failed to talk to her. As time went on, she asked more and more questions about the past, and I felt more and more resentment at the intrusion and fell increasingly silent. I know I was wrong. There was no logical reason for not opening up to her, but eventually she took the view that it meant I didn't love her. I can't blame her for leaving. It must have driven her mad. Her final comment as she left my flat for the last time was that it might be wise to get professional help. I know that I can't keep on like this. I've even kept silent about the fact that she's left. I haven't told a soul. Maybe that shows how much I really love her, because I can't admit that she's gone. I know my parents will be disappointed when they find out. They really like Jane. It's been hard to stop thinking about her these last few days. Work has been a nightmare. Sighing, I switched off the computer. Work was one of those fateful opportunities that came along at the right price not long after I left university and meant that I could afford a place of my own. At the time it seemed perfect. A good job, lots of money, and a nice place to live. But more often, recently, I found myself asking if it really summed up what life was about, what I was about. What was the point in having lots of money if you didn't feel happy how you earned it? You can only lie to yourself that you're satisfied for so long. Maybe tomorrow will be better, I thought, as I grabbed my coat and made my way to the exit. Just as I reached the door, a voice shouted after me. It was Peter, my manager. He demanded to know what had happened to some figures I promised to email over for a meeting tomorrow. "There are a couple of things that don't add up," I replied. "I've been studying them all afternoon and I'm not happy with them. I'll get in early tomorrow morning, crack of dawn. I'll go through them one more time and get them over to you first thing. The meeting's at 9, isn't it?" I can't believe how easily I lied to him. He studied me carefully. He's not an idiot. He knew something was wrong, but I've come through for him so many times in this job he could hardly stop trusting me now. He asked if everything was okay, reminded me of some figures I gave him last week for some important clients that I had to take back and correct. "You're not the new boy any longer," he said. "You'll have been here 10 years soon. It's a long time to be stuck in one place." Familiarity breeds contempt and fear. "New kids are coming in that are dead keen. They can smell blood like a shark. Is everything okay at home? Is Jane okay?" I told him everything was fine. Home, Jane, everything. I was just tired and needed to get back for a meal that Jane was preparing, and if I was late, well, you know. I left the sentence hanging in mid-air, and he waved me out of the door. He looked embarrassed at having to interrogate me, but not half as embarrassed as I felt at having to lie to him. "See you tomorrow, Mike," he shouted after me. "Don't let me down. There's a lot riding on this." Fantastic, I thought. Just what I need right now. I started heading towards the underground. It wasn't that far, a quick 5-minute walk. Usually I took in the sights and smells of the city, but tonight my mind was on other things. I thought of Jane. I thought of work. I'm losing it big time, I thought. What's happening to me? Now I've got to get up even earlier to sort out those figures. There was a main road I needed to cross just before the underground. I went to step off the pavement, still lost in my thoughts, and was stopped suddenly by a smell that came out of nowhere. It had no place in a city of petrol fumes and restaurants, but I recognised it and sniffed the air once more. There was no mistaking it. A heady mixture of Old Spice, Brill cream, and pipe tobacco that I hadn't smelt since. In that instant, the double-decker bus, the one that would have killed me had I stepped into the road, raced past in front of me. The gust of air that caught me in its wake blew dust up into my eyes, and I stepped back, blinded. When I could see again, I stared after the departing bus and at the road before me. I shivered and rubbed my arms instinctively. I wasn't cold, just badly shaken and short of breath. It was the smell. It had stopped me being killed. I looked around me, but no one seemed to have witnessed the incident. I turned back in the direction the bus had come from, and it was then that I saw him, standing in the entrance of the department store behind me. He was smiling at me, his face just the same as I remembered it before illness came and took him away from me. It was Grandad. My breath caught in my throat, and I stood there like a statue, rooted to the spot. I couldn't move or speak or do anything. All I could do was stare at his kind, gentle face. Then he winked at me, the way he did when I was very young, and asked him why tomatoes had to be grown in a greenhouse, or how we were going to replace the missing bale from my cricket set. Even now I can remember how he used the bale that was left as a template to make a replacement, standing over his woodworker's lathe until a perfect copy was finished. I stared at him the whole time, hypnotised by the look of concentration on his face and his dedication to the job at hand. When the new bale was finished, he even varnished it for me. I smiled back at the figure before me. I wasn't scared. Quite the opposite. I suddenly felt at peace with myself and the person I'd become. He was looking at me with such benevolence that I knew he wasn't disappointed in me. I knew. The guilt that I'd felt for the last 10 years lifted from my conscience in an instant, and the feelings of joy and relief that were left in its place made my mouth dry up with emotion. I swallowed hard and licked my lips. Tears welled up in my eyelids and I looked down to blink them away. When I looked up again, he was gone. I had no reason to think that what I'd seen was my imagination. Not unless it also affected my sense of smell, of course, and there was no doubting what I'd just smelt on this busy street in London. I knew that he'd come back to help me, and didn't intend to let him down again. Grandad wouldn't have wanted me to be alone or unhappy. How could I have been so stupid all this time? I suddenly felt overwhelmed at the number of things I knew I had to do, and reached quickly for my mobile. 2 calls in particular had to be made that couldn't wait a moment longer. My parents would be very surprised to hear my voice this early in the week, and even more surprised to hear that I wanted to celebrate my 30th birthday with them after all. It can't have been easy for them all this time, especially my dad, having a son who only confided in his grandfather. He was a good man, and deserved a lot more credit and respect than I'd given him. First, though, I tried calling Jane's number. I'd never tried to win a girl back before, and felt very nervous as I heard the dialing tone. Invite her over for dinner, I thought. Something homemade that'll surprise her. Try making Grandad's chicken casserole. Remember what he told you now. You've got to use proper herbs, not the dried rubbish that you get in jars. I swore under my breath as the call went to answer phone. Then suddenly there was a click, and I heard Jane's voice. Funny how the sound of someone's voice can make everything you plan to say sound like gibberish. I took a deep breath and paused for a moment. Nothing ventured, I thought. Nothing gained. "Hello, Jane. It's Mike," I said.